about to ask you.
Okay, so now we're recording.
Hey.
Sorry about that. I'm Sara Ines Calderon. I work with Women Who Code Austin, and we're putting on this event. We have some really amazing and talented folks with us this evening who are being very generous with their time, and I want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for joining us. Really appreciate everyone who came out tonight. I know we're probably all zoomed out, but I'm really, genuinely excited to share this with y'all because I think especially folks who are already in technology, you kind of end up at a point sooner or later where you're like, where do I go from here? And I definitely want to, share some options of, where you could go from here, or just put it under your hat and you can come back to it when you're ready. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just do like a kind of like brief introduction about what cybersecurity is, just so that we're all kind of talking about the same things. And I'm totally okay with either in the chat or the ladies on the panel correcting me, because I literally just kind of put this together, in the least thorough way possible, just to make it as general as possible. And then we're going to have the ladies introduce themselves. We're going to go through some questions that I've prepared, and then we're going to go ahead and do a question and answer session. So I would encourage you, if you have questions, you can add them in the chat, but you can also just write them down and ask them at the end, because it can get difficult to track back through the chat after people have been conversing and things like that. Finally, if you do have a second, please know that we do have a code of conduct, Women Who Code. I went ahead and shared that in the chat. I certainly have respect for our panelists and for all of y'all. Obviously, I wouldn't be spending my free time putting on events for you if I didn't respect you. So please be respectful. Please review the code of conduct if you feel iffy, and know that we're not going to have you on here if you can't abide by those rules. So, okay, great. So in that vein, I'm gonna go ahead. I didn't prepare a slide, but I'm assuming I can go ahead and share my screen just so that we have a visual aid. And please forgive my Google Doc not being as fancy as perhaps it could be, because we all have lives and we're doing our best. So, okay, cool. I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen. Here we go, where it says share your screen. Cool. So hopefully everyone can see that. So really quickly, just, how to start or transition into cybersecurity. I'm also happy to share this on in Twitter or something. If you would like a copy of this, let me go ahead and the Twitter is, I just put it in the chat. So if you want to reply, I can make sure you get a copy of this. So, all right. So I just kind of looked up what is cybersecurity according to this link on CompTIA. Cybersecurity focuses on protecting electronic assets used to store and transmit information, and information security focuses on keeping all data and derived information safe, including non-electronic information such as paper. So I think that's a pretty good baseline. Clearly there's similarities, but why are we here? Why should you consider making this transition part of your professional life? So, this is something that we hear about technology also, but there's a shortage of millions of professionals. I think we've all been kind of like hearing here and there in the news that there's these ransomware attacks, there's all of these malware attacks. And so I think, if you kind of like lend an ear to security, you're going to start to see that these types of problems are happening more and more in in companies that you may not consider technical. I think when you contextualize that with everything being on the internet, it certainly kind of brings to the forefront, this is a hop-in career. Knowing how, this is something I didn't know when I started looking into cybersecurity, which is not knowing how to code is already an advantage. And so when you're thinking about transitioning or working in a different type of tech, tech industry, keep in mind that not everyone who works in that industry already knows how to code. So you're already kind of ahead of the game in that aspect if you are indeed a software engineer. Information security analyst is going to be the 10th fastest. Oh, sure. Thank you. Information security analyst will be the 10th fastest growing occupation over the next decade. So that's cool. And given how cyber attacks are affecting public and private infrastructure, these roles are going to be critical to, as I mentioned earlier, places you don't consider technical, like hospitals or food or schools, things like that. I think the added bonus is, at least according to some of the numbers I was looking at, you may be able to get a bit bigger paycheck, which, let's be honest, is why we're all really here tonight. So I think another big piece of the puzzle for me, at least when I started looking into cybersecurity, was what kind of job is it? Like, what does that mean? How do I start educating myself, right? So this is something that, I've been fortunate enough to hear a couple different people say, which is, just like in software engineering, there's tons of jobs in security. So you're going to have educators and sales and marketing and project management and public relations and PR and research. Anything you do in software, you do in security analyst, cloud security, application security, mobile security, network security, executives, security architect, penetration testers. There's all kinds of jobs. So with all of that being said, let me figure out how to stop sharing. And all right, I think I did it. And so now I'm super excited to get to our panelists. Sorry. I'm super excited to get to our panelists. What I would really like to do is have them introduce themselves. So if y'all want to get started, the first thing I'd like to know is, if you want to introduce yourself, your name, your title or your profession, and how you got started and where you are now. So let's go ahead and just start with Amanda, because she's top left on the screen.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Cool. So my name is Amanda Lee Keemer. I am based here in San Antonio, Texas, also born and raised here. But I spent 13 years on the East Coast. I did a very weird thing for a Texan and went to school out of state and then ran away and then came back. So I still say just moved back to San Antonio in 2017. So my title right now is founder and CEO of WWCode, which is my small business company, which is really exciting. Also very stressful, a lot of hustling every single day. As Sarita knows, we have that in common. There's always something to do. So I'm really excited to be here with y'all and be able to take a breath and share information. And my background is in nonprofit program management is what I started in. And then transitioned into cybersecurity and national security policy through grad school. And my last position when I was in DC was with the White House under President Obama, where I served in the Office of Management and Budget for the Federal Chief Information Officer. And we also onboarded the first Federal Chief Information Security Officer. So really excited to be here with y'all and share information about cyber and how to get into this particular sector. Thanks.
Thank you. Alma, would you like to go? Because you're the next person that Zoom has shown me.
Sure, thank you. Before I introduce myself, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. I'm very excited. Women Who Code has been instrumental in my own career just by creating a support system and a community internationally that I have been able to network with. So it's really awesome that I get to talk on a Women Who Code panel. I'm excited. And I also want to say thank you to Sada for uh, putting this together and being willing to work with me on these panels. So my name is Alma. I am originally from New York, though I've kind of traveled around. My background, I actually have an undergraduate degree in international relations. So I was working, well, I was an unpaid intern in DC a long time ago. And I decided to go the international education route. And so I worked and taught internationally. I taught English as a second language, and I had a career in education working with students in Latin America, Asia, and Europe. And several years ago, I just had a baby, and I was looking, I needed a job. I also had a small business, Amanda, so I know what the hustle feels like. And it just so happened that I got a job teaching online, and I became extremely curious about how we were building out learning management systems and how we were using virtual learning environments to teach. And that's when I discovered uh, programming, and I also discovered Women Who Code around that time. And I started from there. And uh, several years ago, in my teaching, I was exposed to different regulations like HIPAA and COPA and FERPA, and that's how I really got into cybersecurity for the first time, because I was teaching digital citizenship, kind of like on the education and training side. So from there, I did a coding boot camp, and I also did a graduate degree in teaching and education. And today I am contracting. I am actively looking for a full-time job, but I am contracting as a cybersecurity awareness trainer, cybersecurity specialist. And I work with people to teach them all about cybersecurity and how it can help keep them and their remote teams, up and running, not falling victim to ransomware and whatnot. So that is a somewhat long introduction to who I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alma. And Megan, if you want to kind of round it out and tell us about yourself. Also, your necklace is lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been admiring your earrings actually. You can't see them because they're small, but I have star earrings on too. So yours are fabulous. So happy to be here. As I was listening to our other two panelists, Alma and Amanda, I realized we all actually have a Washington DC connection, which is amazing. So I'm in the DC area. And I've been one of those people who's always just been fascinated by technology. Growing up, loving to tinker. I literally like to play with different software, hardware, right? And I have a soldering setup right in front of me. So I like to build things. I like to tinker. And I went into, because I also like to help people, I went into being a STEM educator. So I was teaching 11th and 12th graders computer science and engineering for over a decade. And over time, I kind of realized, I'm enjoying teaching. I'm enjoying doing this from a helping others perspective, but I want to see what it would be like to be in industry. And so I started taking more courses and looking into that and figuring out what that would look like. And so I went back to school and I got a second degree. So I got a second bachelor's degree in computer science with a focus in cybersecurity and networking. And I've been working in risk assessment with Cyber Future Foundation. It's a great organization where we work on, literally one of our initiatives is cyber peace. So you've heard ransomware mentioned a couple times. That is a problem for nation states, for individuals, and it ends up being an attack on infrastructures. And so that's one of the initiatives that we try to work on. How do we come up with policies, procedures, practices that can help promote cyber peace, working with the United Nations, working with Department of Energy, working with Department of Labor. So those are some of the things that I help do, but I also primarily work on the risk side and mitigating those risks, as well as operations. So we have cyber summits that when international travel was a thing, those were in Switzerland and Davos. And then we have summits. We'll have one in Georgia, in Augusta, Georgia, later this year for cyber awareness. So those are some big things that we work on. Really being able to reach out and help and continue helping and spread that awareness for there are best practices that you can do with, not having passwords on a post-it that's within shoulder surfing site. So those are kind of some of the things we also try to do. And we work on cyber apprenticeships, because you will hear there's all of these jobs in cyber, but then it's also hard to get a job in cyber. You might hear both of those. And so how do you then create a way so that people are in that K through 20 path, that then they're ready, or if they're pivoting like how I did, they're ready to then take off the ground and work in cyber. So apprenticeships are a really good way to do that. So we work with Department of Labor on that. Trying to think of anything else for the moment. Just excited to be here. I'm also in Women Who Code. I like to program in Python in particular, but yeah, happy to be here and talk with you all about all these things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I hope y'all are as impressed as I am. This is like really cool. What I think is really interesting is kind of how everyone came from different, different places, kind of to the same profession. And I think that's what's really exciting to me about this panel. So let's go backwards now. And I would love to hear, you did mention, Megan, that you went to get a second degree. And I would love to hear a little bit more. And I think Amanda or someone mentioned that they would love to hear a little bit more about that. Certainly, I know for myself, even just in software, sometimes I'm thinking to myself, do I want to go get this certification? Do I need to go take this class in order to kind of transition roles or whatever? So if you wanted to tell us a little bit about, what were some of those, barriers to entry, because you were talking about being a STEM educator, and then you decided, I want to do this thing, right? So it sounds like one of the barriers was educational, and one of the ways you overcame that was going to school. So if you could tell us a little bit about, being in one type of career and, kind of your assessment of those barriers, and then how you moved past those barriers, that'd be great.
Yeah, would you like me to start with that one particularly?
Yes, ma'am. We're going to go reverse order now. Reverse order of Zoom. Okay.
I'm actually going to see if I can share screen, because I'm going to show an image that some of you might have seen. And I think this illustrates what one of the big barriers is. Yes, I can. Perfect. Okay, so can everyone see this? Great. Okay, so we all should see a word bubble visual, right? And it says cybersecurity domains. So for me, the big barriers were, what do I want to do? And, I knew that I love technology, such a huge field. So how do you decide what you want to do going to switch careers within technology? So I had to do a lot of thinking about what is out there? What are some subdomains of technology? What would I be most interested in? Well, I like to program, but I don't think I want to do 100% software dev. So what would involve some parts of technical, involve some parts of helping others, involve some aspects of continual learning. And so I had some family members who are already in the intelligence community, abbreviated as IC. And so I had some familiarity with this concept of cybersecurity and had heard about it a lot in the news as well. And so I did some research and I was like, okay, so I think cybersecurity sounds pretty interesting. You're problem solving, you're helping others. And so then another barrier was, oh man, I thought technology was huge, but cybersecurity itself is huge. And so I had to figure out within cybersecurity what I wanted to then sub-specialize in, because it's not that you can just do all these things. There's not enough time in the day, and you just can't know enough. So you have to then decide. And so I've always liked the organizing, operational side. And so I decided that, after taking some courses, I was like, risk assessment seems to be something I'm really drawn towards. But then I also really enjoy still keeping my fingers into some of the technical pieces. And so I've kind of combined risk assessment with cloud security. So I do some work with Cloud Security Alliance, and just looking at how we can have more secure cloud configurations. Sometimes it's also called shifting security left or DevSecOps. So you can really try to plan out how from a software development lifecycle, SDLC, that you're involving security in all realms of it, and then have a stronger pathway. So if we can do risk assessments, and while we're doing that, also be thinking very proactively about security, we'll have a better end product for our users. And then we'll be able to have everything maintain integrity of data, confidentiality of data, and maintain that uptime that we want. So it really should kind of be baked in to what we're doing. And so all those things were really fascinating to me. And so that was kind of a barrier and then a aha moment. But I did feel that for me, the way I learn, I wanted to go back to school. That's not what everyone has to do though. Some people do a lot of like self-taught pieces. And I of course did that as well, like joining, over the wire and Hack the Box, where you literally have to hack into the website to get an invite. Super fun. Doing capture the flags, building out my own virtual private clouds and securing those with various configurations and security controls. All of that, is great self-learning, but I also liked that formal learning, and that was helpful for me. But it's not that everyone has to do that.
Thank you so much. That's interesting. And really, thank you so much for sharing that graphic. I thought that was really interesting. If you wouldn't mind, I'm sure folks would love to have that as a reference in the chat.
Yeah, I'll post it.
Kind of, also, I think the two resources that you mentioned would be really great to share in the chat as well. I just went ahead and kind of gave my very basic definition of like what a capture the flag is. So yeah, and y'all, if you are, like I said, definitely encourage y'all to be filing stuff away to ask questions. So thank you so much for that, Megan. That was excellent. Alma, did you want to go next and just tell us a little bit about, what were some barriers to your transition into cybersecurity? And how did you overcome them? I think, definitely one of the things Megan shared was like analysis paralysis. There's just like so many jobs. So that's a good one. But, any kind of other stuff that you encountered in your own particular experience would be great.
Yeah, so barriers to entry. Okay, I don't know how everyone's going to feel about this one, but I have to say that my biggest barrier to entry was myself. So just believing that I could actually do this was really big. And that would be in relation to cybersecurity or any other career that I was looking to get into. So for me, one of my biggest obstacles has been just that, like, believing that I have the capacity to learn and grow and be in the career that I want to be in. And a part of overcoming that has been to build a really strong network. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Women Who Code has given me amazing connections, like, for example, Sarah and now Amanda. And I met Megan through another amazing organization called Women Cyber Jitsu. So for it, my experience has been that the biggest barrier has been myself, and then overcoming that barrier has just been the biggest challenge. And what that has looked like has also been I've done the CTFs, doing study, all of the industry organizations that I am now a member of. So I recently just joined ISACA as well. women's cyber jitsu, women in cybersecurity, ICMCP is another big one that has just been, I found an incredible mentor through ICMCP. And reaching out and using those resources. So not just the like learning resources, but also like connecting with people and asking questions. And I've just really, really, really decided that I didn't care if I looked stupid. If there was something I didn't know, I was going to go out and find the answer to. And that's just what I continue to do. There is a resource that I would like to share with everybody on this panel. Um, One of the cool security training scholarships that I really recommend, because I know there are some amazing people who are behind the scenes on this one, is actually put together. Let me see if I can find everyone in meeting. Okay. It's actually put together. It started with Women in Cybersecurity, Google, and SANS, and I think they've gotten more corporate sponsors involved. But I learned of it through Women in Cybersecurity. It's a security training scholarship, and it's a lot of fun. It helps you build your network, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat right now. They are taking applications until August 2nd. So you still have time to apply. And the program manager, I actually was able through doing this scholarship, I was able to network with the program manager. And now she's someone that I work in cyber, but she's someone who works with a cybersecurity organization. So I find that helpful to kind of get a lay of the land, especially when you're new to something. So really working on taking those networks or creating those networks. Did I cut out? Can everyone hear me?
You cut out, but you came back. At least I got you back.
Okay, cool. So I just really, that barriers of, there will be people who will be jerks and tell you things like, this wasn't related to cybersecurity, but I feel like I should share this story. When I decided to do my coding bootcamp, I had someone tell me that I should not waste my time, that I should leave the coding to the teenage boys in their parents' garage and not even bother with trying to transition into a career in technology. And this was from somebody who I considered a friend. Needless to say, I no longer consider them a friend, and I've eliminated that relationship from my life. But there will be people who will try and put those barriers in front of you, and they're actually, I don't think they're really barriers. I think the barriers are the ones that we put in our mind. And so if someone tells you no, go somewhere else, find somewhere else. Um, Network, and there are so many organizations right now focused on helping people into the field that you'd be surprised. And you know, this one particular scholarship is just one example of many. Like there's a lot. So it also can kind of get to the point of like, it's a little bit overwhelming and you don't know which way to go. So being able to connect with people who are subject matter experts, who are like your ideal of like, I would like to be there someday. It's a good idea. And also, I would also encourage you to kind of sit down and have a strategy and then reevaluate your strategy. And I'm referring to like your career strategy, like every X amount of time, like every 3 months or 6 months or every year, just check back and see how you're going on with your strategy. Because I think, I made a post about this on LinkedIn. There's no like one way to a career in cybersecurity. This is a kind of build your own adventure kind of thing. So that is what I have to share about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I do want to highlight for our participants here that there's a bunch of great resources that Megan and some other folks have shared in the chat. The program, the scholarship that Alma was referring to is in there as well. Excuse me. And yeah, it sounds really interesting, like that, that the barrier can be like, what do I do? But also that there's a lot of resources if you start looking for them. And I think that is probably something that folks who already work in tech have already experienced with learning to code as well. So I would love to hear a little bit more about Amanda, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you kind of experienced, obviously, when you were trying to transition from whatever you were doing before into cybersecurity, and kind of like what were some ways that you mitigated some of those barriers?
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for repeating the question, because I was going to ask you to do that too. So my path was a little different. So like I said, I started in nonprofit management. So if anybody here is in a nonprofit space or some other sector, school, whatever, that's not corporate, like you're fine. You can position yourself and pivot into cyber. So start with that. For me, I started in like program management, social media marketing, like in 2008, 2009. So the way that I came to cyber was through privacy policy. So when I was doing social media, online marketing, digital media, whatever it was called back in like 2008, 2009, it was very new. And so I think of it as having like two hats on, or two different perspectives, where one was the consumer hat, well, the marketer hat. Let's start with the marketer hat. So you could go into Facebook, which you can still do now. You can be logged in as your page. You can see people that you're not connected with, you have no relationship with, but they engage and they interact with your company. You can, even more now, it makes more sense, but maybe 10 plus years ago, we didn't have a lot of cases that we could point to. But now people understand that you can micro-target, you can use paid advertising to segment out different groups online. And so that was interesting to me. From a nonprofit perspective, it was cost effective. So if we're trying to advocate for a particular position, or we're trying to get people to take action online, you can start to see how you have to think differently. You have to think about, how do you get people to act? How do you get people to change behavior? How do you engage people? How do you communicate things in an easy to understand way? I think a lot of those skills carry over into cyber. So if you're in marketing, if you work on a design team, if you're a coder, if you're a programmer, developer, if you translate between technical and non-technical audiences, which I would argue increasingly, like there's no such thing as non-technical, everybody has some kind of technical skill. There's a place for you in cyber, right? So I would have that marketer hat on. The other hat was a consumer. So I identify as Latina and Chicana. There are not a lot of us in cyber, period. There's not enough of us in women, period, in cyber, but there's definitely not enough women of color in cyber either. And so I would ask myself, like, if I'm saying, where's my data, and I'm educated, I'm English dominant, I'm born in the States, I have access to the internet, I have friends who understand things, right? Like, imagine how scary it is when you don't have all those things. How are people understanding where their data is? And so that's why I came into cyber through privacy policy. So when it came time to go to grad school, my undergrad degree was in Russian. My master's degree is in international relations. And that's where I focus on national security policy and IT policy, because I was looking at it through the lens of privacy. It was around the time of Snowden leaks, WikiLeaks and all that, surveillance reform, which was fascinating to me. From a policy and communications perspective. So just really big questions, like, what is the intelligence community? How do you even explain that to like your neighbor or somebody in a grocery store line? Like, what is cybersecurity? What is privacy? Like, those questions I love. I love breaking those down into really digestible things for people to understand. So that's how I came into cyber in that way. So through grad school, through work experience. So arguably, right, if I started my career in like 2008, so I didn't get into a cyber role until I worked at the White House in 2016, right? Technically, that was like a cyber policy role. So it was a roundabout way. And I share that because it's not necessarily A to B to C to D thing, like becoming a doctor, there are specific steps. I think to your point, Sarita, you can enter cyber in a bunch of different ways. It can be marketing, it can be a developer, engineering, coding, anything. But like you said in the beginning, if you have an understanding of security, of course, of privacy, I would argue too, then you're going to be really, really valuable to any team that you bring, a startup, government, nonprofit, anything. So that's how I came to cyber. I would say in terms of barriers, like I said, I came from the nonprofit world in DC. So to transition into federal government was very difficult. I did not have any luck with USA Jobs, for those of y'all who are familiar with USA Jobs. So that's part of the reason why I went the appointee route. There were a bunch of Latinos who were political appointees. I had never heard of the process. I wasn't familiar with it, but at that time, I looked at the president in the office, who was President Obama at the time, and I was like, yeah, I agree with what he's trying to do. I would be happy to serve as a presidential appointee. It did take a year, right? So again, in terms of barriers, I kept getting interviews for comms roles like social media, digital marketing, and I have to keep saying no, right? I wasn't excited for those interviews. I went to grad school to work in cyber policy, national security policy, defense policy. That was my thing, right? Like I didn't do all that work for 3 years for nothing. So staying persistent in that way was really important to me, and staying focused. So that made it easy to say no to things that were not a good fit. And so I think luck is a lot of it. I don't think we say that a lot. It's like not cool to say that, but it really is. Like sometimes you can send out 100 applications, 200 applications. It's just that one yes that gets you in the door, which takes a lot of mental time and energy. So I would just say if you're applying for roles, just keep applying. I think folks have already mentioned certifications. I mentioned about CTFs and other programs that companies have. If there's someone you want to work with, apply to jobs, network, and do some of the technical work, right? Demonstrate skill in this space so people know that you're serious about it. And then also the groups that people mentioned are really important for networking. So I wanted to drop 2 quick links in there that have been helpful to me. So in San Antonio, we just started in May of 2020, a WISIS, so Women's Cybersecurity San Antonio affiliate. So I put our YouTube link in there. We did a bunch of events throughout the past year online. Some of them are exactly what we're talking about today: entering the cyber workforce, cyber certifications, which ones you should get, why, how to study, Capture the Flag 101, incident response and handling, and then pathways to cyber, one of my former White House colleagues, which was really, really interesting. And her perspective was similar to mine, right? We're arguably generalist in cyber, like we can kind of be anywhere and help bridge anything. But now I feel like I'm getting to a point where looking ahead to barriers, like I need certifications. I'm still passionate about privacy policy, so I'm looking at that certification, which is a CIPP US, so Certified Information, Privacy Professional, sorry, for the US privacy policies. There's also one for the EU. And then the other thing that's been really helpful to me, and maybe it's overwhelming for y'all too, is I just put a link to NIST. And don't be off put because it's like K-12 oriented necessarily, but just know that there are a lot of free resources online. Like you don't necessarily have to pay to learn or pivot into cyber. I think when you get to certifications, of course, yes, but there's so much online. I'm trying to think if there are any other barriers. Of course, being a woman, right? Great, it sucks. Like you get overlooked for a lot of things, especially as a business owner. But what's really exciting is like the yeses, I think. Just building that space now with my own business has been very different. I have not worked in the private sector for a cybersecurity company, and I'm okay with that. I think I really like public service. I like working with students, which people don't think of cybersecurity professionals doing, right? Like building up the next workforce, the next generation of leaders coming behind us. I think that's work that I'm really excited about. and then potentially entering into academia. And there's barriers that come with that too, right? I have to still work on some things in that space. So it's ever evolving. There's just sometimes not enough time, but trying to stay focused on the privacy certification for myself and maybe a cyber certification this year. And then hopefully become an adjunct somewhere would be something I'm trying to do. Is that helpful?
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Good luck with that certification. I think that brings up a really good point, which is that everyone's been talking about, there's these, networks and there's these resources and you can kind of get started. But then you're also going to kind of hit that point where you're like, okay, now I need to formalize this training to extend my opportunities, right? In that vein, y'all gave such eloquent and descriptive answers. I think I'm going to consolidate my next two questions, which is, I think y'all gave really good, you told really interesting stories about like why you wanted to get into cyber. And I think it kind of like helps people think about why they might want to get into cyber. And you talked about like the benefits, but I think what's, interesting and perhaps, certainly to myself, but I'm assuming also to our participants here is like, where are the, kind of Amanda brought it up briefly, which is, privacy policies, right? What are the growth areas? Like, what are the new up and coming things that are going to be happening in cyber that folks, here on our meetup can either, as I mentioned, start looking at now with all these great resources that you shared, or kind of just like put under their hat while they think about, maybe the next year, maybe the next 2 years, this would be something that I would be interested in. So like just a few examples, like cloud security or, privacy policy, or like we've been seeing, all of these malware attacks, right? I don't know, there's probably like a handful of jobs around those malware attacks at least, but so yeah, so let's go ahead and ask Alma, like, what do you see as, kind of the future of this industry? Where do you see yourself kind of going as the industry, in the next few years?
This is a really great question. And I kind of like, I want to hear what Megan has to say, but maybe I'll like start with what I think she'll say and she can then like expand upon it. So I actually think that there's a couple of things. First of all, when we are like more and more connected. So think Internet of Things, obviously, but it's going like we're going like beyond that. So, we're talking about like how technology is showing up in all aspects of our lives, but then taking that one step further with artificial intelligence. So how is that connecting into AI? And I'm also really interested in seeing how this is going with like what's going to happen with quantum computing. Also, what is this like with how many days ago was it when Mr. Bezos went to take a bathroom break in outer space? Space travel. I also think that that's the next couple of years, cybersecurity and space travel. And then this is where the sci-fi geek in me comes out and says, what about security and aliens, cybersecurity, and all of those things that are floating around out there. But yeah, definitely. I know we already know about baby monitors in cars, but that stuff isn't going anywhere. Like our smart speakers aren't going anywhere. Is there a way to make your speakers dumb so you can like have a safe conversation around them? Or I personally don't use Alexa or anything like that because so I think the future, to sum it up, the future is more of what we already know about. So like IoT, the devices that we're putting into our bodies, can those be hacked as well, and the security in them? But then like going out to talk about artificial intelligence and people in space. So Yeah, now I want to, I really like to hear what Megan has to say.
Well, on that note, Megan, where do you kind of see like your future in this industry, or like, what do you think some growth areas are going to be? And I should have asked this too, but it just came up with Alma's answer. And like, what are the skills that are going to be needed to address, those new areas, right? Or to Amanda's point, what are the certifications that might be needed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Alma, a lot of what you were saying was along the lines of what I might say. So some of the things that I really, really see growing, they did some numbers last year, blanking on who did the analysis, but it was pretty pervasive, where they saw 130% growth in cloud security. So it's a huge area of growth. And you think about like how many things that you might do as an individual that involve the cloud, right? Like you might be using Spotify, you might be using Google Docs, etc. All of those are functioning through the cloud. Most of our data functions through the cloud. So now what happens is you have cloud configurations that go awry. You have infrastructure as code, IAC, that people are just using without thinking through it, and it may not be configured correctly. You might have third-party vendors that are going in, and so there end up being some security of data issues that happen. So I think that's going to be a huge part that continues. And then with the interconnectedness piece, you have laws like GDPR for privacy that are a European Union specific law, but it connects with other parts of the country because of our interconnected nature. Right now, there's something that's being written that is a draft law. So it's the draft EU AI regulations, and it's for artificial intelligence and autonomous technology. And so it's draft, it's not fully fleshed out yet, but it will likely become a law potentially later on this year or in 2022. And that's going to have a big impact on the way that data is processed by AI and autonomous technology. You think about your driverless cars, as well as the security around that data. And the way it's written right now, and I don't think this part will change, there's a subsection of it that is AI and autonomous technology systems that are in development that don't even get deployed. So it ends up becoming a very largely encompassing law. And it is, of course, for the European Union, but that data goes all over, and so then it impacts the rest of the world. So that's one thing. And then for the US specific, there was an IoT law that was passed last year from the Department of Defense. It's called CMMC. And so that has a lot of regulations around the way our Internet of Things, smart devices all connect. And it's kind of a funny question that you might want to ask security professionals: how many of them actually have smart homes? So Alma referenced that too. I have no smart devices in my home. And so it can be kind of a funny question to find out from people, like, well, what kind of tech do you use, and how do you use your tech, and what type of security measures do you have? There's just a lot of points of weakness with IoT. So you will see a lot of security professionals not having that very interconnected home, or if they do, they have a really tremendous auditing system set up, a network scanning system set up. They're probably using like Zeek or something like that to really be mapping their whole network and scanning it. So those are kind of some of the threads I see: more regulation around IoT, AI and autonomous, and then cloud security. And then for skills, I think there's a combination of skills that go into being able to handle all of those things. So I like to call these the essential skills and not the soft skills. It's your ability to communicate, because you need to be able to share your thoughts about something, and then you need to be able to work on a cross-functional team and convince someone that the security is important. So there's communication, there's persuasion, and then you're not always going to get your way. So it's risk mitigation, risk management, because it is about what is the organization's risk appetite? How much risk are they willing to take on? Because they're not going to do all the security features you want. Security teams never get 100% of the things they want, and that's okay. But there needs to be awareness around, these are the critical issues. So there has to be an ability to prioritize as well. These are the most critical issues. This is going to be how we're going to fix them. And then you deliver that communication up to the C-suite and down also to engineers. So it's kind of like a two-sided communication piece that security teams have to do. And so those essential skills are really, really important. So analysis, communication, being able to speak to technology. But it really depends. Like, I started my intro with that visual. It depends on what you go into. So if you went into like cloud architecting and you were doing like secure cloud architecting, you're going to be in a much more technical role. So it depends on your interest, what skills you want to develop. So there's a lot of different routes that one can go with these things. So I think that kind of covers it.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So Amanda, if you want to take us home, I would love to hear kind of like what you think the future is going to look like in this field, what the skills are going to be like, and also just to our participants, if you have questions, get those ready because we're going to be gearing up for a Q&A here in a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So I like thinking about what's going to happen next, but it's also terrifying. And I think we should all be a little terrified in terms of what's coming. So I guess the easy one I'll answer first is around skills, anything, right? Like I really can't say it enough. I think with the pandemic, we have people that are pivoting from, and maybe there's people in this call too, who before they were engineers and developers and coders, they were in retail or they were in food service or customer service or call centers or healthcare. I think that's going to increase. If you look at like healthcare folks are exhausted, but they're familiar with HIPAA. So maybe they want to go to information technology or they want to go over to cyber or they want to learn how to code or they want to figure out what's working, infrastructure wise, what that looks like. I think that's going to be really interesting to look at skills wise. I would also say like, I joke sometimes with, especially like folks in our community, that if you're nosy, cyber is perfect for you. If you pick up on trends, patterns, yes, it's perfect for you. I tell students all the time, if you like catching people in a lie, social engineering, right? Like all of that is great for you. Like you like pushing boundaries. This is like the field to do that in. I think that's exciting to me, right? Like we need people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different abilities, people whose brains work differently, right? Like on the spectrum of neurodiversity. I think that's something that's not explored and celebrated enough. I think other countries they finally are recognizing that you have talent in different areas and different populations that you have not used before. I think the United States is really far behind in workforce development sense of people from communities that are not, I don't know, I'm not going to say normal, but not the stereotypical cyber person, right? That you see in the movies and stuff like that. So in terms of skills, I think everybody on this call probably has the skills to be a cyber professional today. It's just going to depend on what, like y'all said, your interests are. In terms of like the field overall, I think what's terrifying to me is the connections, the increasing globalization, like everything else, how much we rely on each other. I mean, if you're in Texas, just look at our grid from February. That was not a hack. That was not in nation state. That was not that we did it to ourselves, right? Like we have enough things going wrong on our own. Plus you partner that with somebody with bad intentions and it gets worse. That's terrifying to me. So that still stays in my brain from February, that on a global stage, like that was our one weakness, where from an economic development perspective, we used to tout that. Honestly, as Texas grid is disconnected from the East and West Coast. So we're self-contained. So we have a lot of national security missions in Texas. We encouraged businesses to come here. We haven't seen anything yet about, people judging or second guessing that, but I just think that's interesting to think through. I was at a military related event related to DoD and their information networks and how they're looking to protect their government and our just military in general, but also our country. And I think it was, and honestly, this is partly of why I'm like in cyber. I think when Snowden, and whatever your opinions are about it, I know they're very strong opinions both ways and in the middle. But I think when I look at the future, I think about President Obama's remarks, and I'll find the link and post it in the chat because it's fascinating to read his remarks after or about surveillance reform at the NSA. But he said something like, no one expects Russia and China to have privacy laws and to follow civil liberties and to respect, individual rights. Like they don't, but we do. And that's also what keeps us from doing things that maybe that would help our country be more safe, because we're a democracy and we ask people for their opinions. So when I'm thinking about the future of cyber, like we're not moving fast enough, we're not efficient, we're not as focused, we don't have the workforce. So basically, cybersecurity is everyone's job, I would think, is like the future. Like, how do you get a whole nation to see that cybersecurity is your job, right? In the same way that littering is bad, in the same way that you have to wear a seatbelt, in the same way that you look both ways when you cross the street. I think as all of us think about our career in cyber, like what role do I play in helping people understand that cybersecurity is their job, no matter who you are? I think that's going to be really interesting in the future.
Thanks for that, Amanda. That's super heavy, but also like really interesting. I mean, I think if we're just going to do a quick summary, what we're talking about here is that every skill set is going to be necessary to address the challenges that we're going to be facing in a world in which more devices have your data. That data is being stored in the cloud, and that cloud is talking to the whole internet. So yeah, that's intense. So I'll be real honest, trying to figure out how to do Q&A on Zoom, and I don't know how. So if you want to just drop your questions in the chat, I'll go ahead and just like moderate them. And to our wonderful panelists, I'm happy with y'all, just whoever wants to kind of answer the question, go for it. So I think there's a question here from Daisy Santos, who asked, how can someone who isn't from the tech industry get started on a path to cybersecurity? Daisy, I don't know if you joined later, but we definitely have folks who can answer that question. Everyone else, feel free to drop your messages in the chat, and I will make sure that we get to as many as possible.
And can I also add to Daisy's question? Sarah, is that okay? Okay, so that actually made me think of a post that I saw on LinkedIn. So there's this really cool CISO that I follow on LinkedIn. Her name is Naomi Buckwater. I think that's the last name. And she really calls out these job postings so those who are unfamiliar, I shared a graphic of certifications for cybersecurity, and there are a lot, and then there's always new ones coming out, but it goes from like the most basic to the most advanced. So there are postings for cybersecurity jobs that are like entry level, and they're asking for a CISM, and a CISM is like you get it once you have I think it's like 5 years experience in cybersecurity management. So that's obviously not entry level. It makes absolutely no sense to ask for a certification that you can only get after you have a couple of years of provable experience in the field. So what Naomi did in this post, so she took this job description, it was an actual job description, pointed out where the mistakes were, and then rewrote it. And I read the rewritten version, and it just made me so happy because it's like Daisy asked, if you're not coming from a tech background. So basically, they're not asking for any certifications. They're not asking you to come from a tech background. They're saying, a high school or a GED. And then for experience, it's like, like help desk experience, like a really good way to get started in my technical side of cyber is like IT support, help desk, you know, looks like kind of like running Zendesk type of things. So Daisy, if you're interested, connect with me on LinkedIn and I can show you that post and you can read through it and kind of like see an actual illustration of what it looks like, you know, to get into cyber without necessarily coming from tech.
Awesome.
And
Thanks for
I
what
that.
would
agree
it
with
do?
Alma. If I could just add real quick. So one thing I did not do a good job maybe of saying is like I did not come from like a tech background either or cyber background. And when I had to interview for my White House position, I was really nervous because I was worried that they wouldn't pick me because I was coming from nonprofit and all of that. So I get the fear of coming from a different industry. What I will say is that there's so much online. So like events like this, like even if it's dentistry or whatever else that's on your resume, add like additional experience or, you know, volunteer, whatever, like make it up like a heading on your resume and then include the things that you're going to show like you're trying to pivot. So even if you don't have a certification, but you're going to this event or you're a member of Women in Cybersecurity, or you've gone to the virtual Grace Hopper celebration, you know, look for those events like Sarah mentioned in the beginning, the different organizations, and sell yourself that way. And I think the other thing to remember is that customer service applies to everything, right? Like you can be a great cybersecurity professional with tons of certifications, but if you're a jerk and you do not work or you do not work well under pressure, nobody's going to work with you. I would imagine, I think somebody mentioned dentistry, like you work well under pressure. Like you've been up close with probably some crisis like situations, like you can play that up. So look on LinkedIn for job descriptions, like Alma said, and take that verbiage and see what applies to you today. The other example I was going to say real quick is if you're a mom or a parent at home and you're transitioning to the workplace again overall, and you want to get into cyber, I think that's also a good transition because again, you work well under pressure, you can balance a budget, all these skills that you already have, right? Essential skills, like Megan said, that can apply to cybersecurity. You can run a team, you're not faced by men in your face, potentially being told no, having to make your case, like all these things are skills, right, that you're going to need in cyber because it is very tough. I know somebody asked if it's an 8-hour at your computer job. Like technically, yes, like you're on a computer device or monitoring things, yes, in your job, but no day is the same, right? Like you don't know what you're going to see every day. So it's not like it's boring at your desk. It's going to keep you on your toes and it's going to keep changing and you will not be out of a job, right? So it's just things to keep in mind.
Thanks for that. So I did want to highlight that in the actual meetup description, we have ways that you can connect with the panelists. And I will say, from my own personal experience, Twitter is a great place to do that. If you don't want to tweet, you can just be a lurker, or you can just absorb information from people. I've learned a lot about different cybersecurity stuff just from following people that I never even talked to. So you should feel free to do that. The other thing I did want to address was the what do you do for real world experience? If you want to scroll up in the chat, you'll probably see links that Megan and Alma shared that are like capture the flag events and other resources that you can go to kind of like start getting experience. And then we have a question about ageism in the field. And then we have a question about resources and for apprenticeships. Brianna Daniels, Megan shared a link to some apprenticeships somewhere in the chat as well. Okay, cool.
And I just dropped one.
You.
I just dropped one too.
Okay,
that.
cool. And then just to kind of like emphasize what Amanda was saying is like, if you think about, I know this is like the example I keep using, but if you think about something like a malware attack on, let's just say, like, I don't know, an Etsy store. You're going to have people who have to write up and send out a press release, people who have to talk to reporters. You're going to have the actual technical people. You're going to have the technical people as managers. You're going to have, customer service, dealing with all the customers. So just to kind of reiterate, like, what's an example of how any skill set could actually be useful in this, in this kind of field. I think if you think about like stuff that actually happens behind the scenes, there's all kinds of people doing all kinds of things to, and all kinds of jobs, right? So anyway, let's see here. Do we, what other questions do we have? We do have the ageism question, and Megan, I don't know if you wanted to address any of the other stuff that we've been talking about.
The ageism one I can't really address. I am like not that old. I mean, not that, like, I don't know. So I look younger than I am too. So I can't really speak to that. But I do know people who are in their 50s and above who've switched careers. I actually even heard of someone who was like in their 70s and switched into cyber. So I don't know. Those are just anecdotes. So I don't know if ageism is a huge piece to it, but I know that those two people were able to switch in. Other parts with resources, I can repost the Wakelet. I believe if you go by file and then there's the ... also called hamburgers, that you can save the chat. And so then if you save the chat, once this meeting ends, you'll have access to all of those as well. But the Wakelet is a repository of resources. And then I shared a Google Doc that has a whole bunch of different capture the flag specific things. And many of the things I was speaking about, I've also given conference talks on. So like the draft EU AI regulations, I've given a conference talk on. I didn't speak about OSINT at all, but I've given a conference talk on open source intelligence gathering. I just did that this past weekend. So I'm happy to share continued resources about those. And if you connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn, on Twitter in particular, I share out, these are upcoming conferences. These are upcoming trainings that are free. I do a little bit of that on LinkedIn, but more so on Twitter. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of continue sharing those things.
Excellent, thank you so much. We have another question on whether taking a cybersecurity bootcamp is a good start. I'll let y'all address that.
Before we go on to that one, the question about ageism, I have been on panels and I've had conversations about this. So I think sorry, my cat can be a little bit too aggressive in his love. I definitely hear that it's an issue. So I'm not sure what the best way to approach it is, but I think that with any kind of ism, so like, being a person of color, being someone who identifies in the LGBTQ community, it's always like something that it's kind of like, oh, did I not get this because I'm openly queer? Did I not get this because I am a woman? Did I not get this because I am Latina? It it sucks, and it's a reality that we have to deal with. I would really think it's really important to rely on your network, to build a strong network, and reach out to some of the other people in the space who are older. Connect with them, talk to them. I think that's also really important. And then the cybersecurity bootcamp, is that a good start? Yeah, why wouldn't it be? Sure, of course. It's just a matter of like we've been talking about, it's kind of like build your own adventure. Where do you want to go with your boot camp? Like, what do you want to do? Cyber is just so big. It's huge. So where do you want to go? And I also kind of like coming back to the age, depending on your age, there might be more programs more like suited to you. So I'm also a member of WCAPS. So WCAPS is Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation. And they have like an actual program for Gen Zers. So, there's also girl security. And if you're, it depends on what you want to do, and how do you figure out what you want to do. Well, start doing your reading, talking to people, watch videos, research, um, and you'll just kind of like begin to figure it out.
I have a question. So it kind of speaks to stuff that other folks have been bringing up, which is like, how do I get experience, right? And I mean, I'm assuming as in software that the actual number of especially paid, but even free apprenticeships or internships is pretty small. What if, is it fair to go out and like get your own experience? Like, I was talking about this young lady I know only through Instagram whose account got hacked. Like, could I like create a curriculum of, best practices for, social media for business owners, and then like, develop a free trial for people? Does that count as experience if I volunteer with a nonprofit and like help beef up their security, like what's going to count professionally for like experience? Is that a good question? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. I think it's kind of like, I mean, Megan just put it, I think we've been saying that, so we might feel like broken records a little bit. But again, like coming into this space brand new, I went to a lot of workshops. And again, I was in DC, but they're really anywhere now. And because we're all working from home, or we have access to the internet, I will assume, because most people are here. Even if you didn't, right? Hopefully there are resources we can find. But anyway, there are so many resources online, right? So look up like NIST. We listed a few resources for them. They have focus groups, they have working groups, they have things around IoT, engineering. I mean, really nerdy technical stuff at the intersection of engineering and cybersecurity. So if you're interested in that space, go for it, right? You have to do the work though. You have to read reports, you have to look up the news, and not just news about headlines, but read the actual reports, like read the threat intel reports. Like, what did they find? How did the threat actors get in there? What did they do? Like, see how you can pick apart those. You're not going to expect it to understand everything, but even look at it as, again, like a puzzle piece. Like, what tools did they use? Is it ransomware? Is it malware? Is it combination? Was it social engineering? Like, what excites you? I think you have to look at it like your own life group project. Like, what's exciting to you to read, and then go down that rabbit hole. And then list that on your resume, right? Like, list it in your cover letter, like show your enthusiasm in the interviews, like network, meet people. I mean, this is not like going to come to you, right? And I think, to kind of push back on what you said, I think there are a lot of paid opportunities in this space. I think there's a lot of free volunteer stuff too. Yeah. But there are paid opportunities, right? And you have to leverage that. And I think particularly since mostly everybody here identifies as a woman, and I saw imposter syndrome come up, like, yes, it's a thing, but honestly, you don't have time. And when you're trying to defend a network, like, it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl or whatever, senior or older, you need somebody to fix it and get things back up and running. So I would say, like, just be persistent and find what you like to do and do it. And then if you find something else that you like in that space, like, hop over to that, see people's careers. Like, I mean, there's so much homework that you have to do. So part of me is like, yes, like, opportunities are out there, but you have to go and find them, do your research, look for them. Everything's online, right? So it's really in people's hands right now. And the demand is there for the talent. And those are persistent.
Thank you. I saw that Tara had a question. I'm trying to figure out if you
think Megan was talking.
Yeah, I was going to add on to the imposter syndrome a moment from what Amanda was saying. So, I pivoted careers, like all three of us actually did. None of us started in security. And one of the times I was actually on a panel with some people, and I was like, yeah, I'm pivoting to security. And I had that as like a, ing gerund verb. And I was like, I'm pivoting. And my friend stopped me and he was like, no, Megan, you've been speaking at conferences, you've been on panels, you've written, you're published, you have your insecurity. Like, but it was this imposter syndrome of not wanting to say that I was fully in industry yet, because I was still working on learning some things. But you'll always be working on learning some things, and there will always be someone who knows more than you, but you'll also always know something more than someone else too. So it's kind of finding this balance between like, okay, I know a little bit more, I'm going to share out and give back from what I know, and help others from what I know. And it was hard for me to say like, okay, I have arrived, I am in industry, I'm in security. So that was a little bit difficult for me. So that imposter syndrome can be very real.
Yes, applause. And applause to what Amanda said too. Like once you're like doing the research, how did you say it, Amanda? Once you're doing the, oh, I lost it. Once you're learning about cyber, you're a cyber person. Boom, done, mic drop. Like that's it. Because there's always going to be somebody who will be like that person to be like, what do you know? I've been doing cybersecurity since, we were punching holes on cards or whatever. And like, you know, whatever. There's always going to be someone who that like that one person who might make you feel, but the thing is like no one makes you feel that. You decide that I'm going to take this on and I'm going to feel that way. So what Megan said really resonated with me too, because tomorrow I'm talking on another panel to talk about a security paper that was published. Like I wrote a policy paper that's been published, a security policy. It's not like I did the thing, like I've done the things, I've given the talks, and I continue to do it. So I have made an agreement with myself that the imposter syndrome, I'll be like, okay, yeah, you're there. And like, kind of like you kind of pick these things up and you decide if you're going to let them continue to impact you, or you're just kind of like, turn around and be like, yeah, I think that sometimes, but I also think sometimes that I might have like a terminal disease and I'm going to die tomorrow. Like you don't entertain those thoughts for very long and then you move on with your life. So imposter syndrome, yeah, I definitely, and it's definitely something that you can work on. And I think what Megan just said is like a really good example of make a list of the things like that you're doing, that you have done, even if it's like seriously, like I signed up for this CTF and I did it. Even if you like didn't understand half of what was in the CTF, it doesn't matter. You did it, it's done, and then you go on to the next thing. I wrote this blog post, I talked on this panel, and have your list above your computer, have it next to you, put it in your wallet. I don't know. And as time goes by, the list will get longer and longer. And like what Megan's friend said, you're not transitioning, you have transitioned. Like you're not pivoting, you have pivoted, like you're there. So before you know it, you'll be there too.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, everyone has shared their contact information with us in the meetup event. So you can connect with them on LinkedIn, you can follow them on Twitter. I see a question here from Daisy about work schedule. Do you work a 9 to 5? Do you work night shifts? Are you on call? Do you have good time off? I also saw a question from Laura, your favorite place to get cyber threat intelligence reports. Megan has graciously answered. The threat reports from a place called Mandiant, Dragos, Verizon, and PulseDive. You can check that out in the chat. And also, I think we got another one of the answers we've been getting all evening, which is it depends. You can apply for a job that's going to have you be on call, or you can be, as Megan said, intentional about not applying for those types of jobs. So do we have anyone else? We got like this is a 5-minute warning, I did want to end the meeting at 8.
I've seen 2 times the same question for Amanda, and I don't know if Amanda's answered it already. When you mentioned terrifying, will you expand on that? What word are you referring to?
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah, I answered it. And I also put something in the chat already.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So if anyone else has any other questions, now is your shot. Shoot your shot. But I would just say I also really enjoyed, y'all, and thank you so much for giving us part of your evening. It is being recorded. I am aiming to have this uploaded to the Women Who Code YouTube channel, which if you follow our Twitter account, which again, I will share here, I will tweet out. And as I mentioned, definitely don't miss out on checking out the meetup event link so that you can connect with these amazing ladies. But you want to join the Slack channel, I'm going to have to go get that link, but if you want to tweet at me, I can get you the invite for the Slack channel because it's a little complicated. Yeah, ladies, is there anything that you want to add that I didn't ask that's like a definite, pro tip or anything?
I would just add, and I'll kind of close from my perspective on this, is a lot of it comes down to mindset. You really need to keep it in mind that you'll never know everything, but be curious, be up for learning, and then choose what you're going to say yes to. Like if you're first starting, you might say yes to a lot of things and then have to scale back. But I posted this in chat. I'm a big fan of the phrase opportunity favors the bold. So thinking about like, what are the steps that I need to do to get to where I want to go, and what yeses will help me get there. And I think Amanda said this, like, don't be a jerk. So like if you end up being on InfoSec Twitter at all, it can be an interesting place. I'm full of the like, let's spread love and kindness. Like literally someone earlier today was saying, y'all, I'm struggling. And I sent her a picture of my floofy chinchilla and was like, I'm sending you some floofy chinchilla love. I hope you're doing okay. And I don't even know this person. She's just also an InfoSec. And it came up on my Twitter feed. And so I really try to go out there and like spread that kindness and not be a jerk. And I think that helps me mentally and also is better for the world. So be curious, think about what you're going to say yes to, and be kind.
And I want, to add on to what Megan said. So find people like Megan. People are going to be like spreading the love and just people who, and it's funny how they will find you if you just focus on what you think you need to do to get to your next step. So, Amanda sharing her story of like, and I went from this and then I went to that. And it kind of like, your for all of us, our path kind of like started opening up. But I think it had a lot to do with like who the people were like along the way, like saying, hey, over here, there's this opportunity. And if you don't like go out a little bit and raise up your hand and be like, hey, I'm looking for people, there's this really cool I think he's a CISO on LinkedIn. I'm blanking on his name is Rides. Chris Rides. And Chris Rides gave like really concise advice about growing your cybersecurity brand. So like one of the things you want to do is you want to be on LinkedIn and try to connect with 10 new people every day and post every day. Like these are like the best practices. But in the end, you want to try and find people who are like cool and supportive and, at the same time will kind of like tell you things in like a very clear manner, as clear as possible. Because the last thing you want is like someone kind of like telling you, oh, yes, 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 you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, when really, maybe you should be like doing this instead of that. So, in the end, it's if you kind of have the mindset of this is the adventure I'm going on and I can't wait to see what happens next, then I think you probably have a better time of it, with your cyber career and just in general with life.
Did you want to share anything, Amanda, before we all sign off? I don't think we have.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick. I like to say like you're the CEO of your life, right? Like, and if something's not a good fit, like you have that feeling in your gut that you're not going to be happy. And I think you have to listen to that. If there's something on the other side where you're super excited to learn something, like follow that, right? You're not too old, you're not too young, you're not too girly. Obviously, I love glitter, like to be in like this space and be taken seriously, right? The other thing too, I will say, I don't think I mentioned, and I feel funny like having to say this, but like men are not the enemy necessarily in cybersecurity, right? We have other enemies. I have my little group of men of different ages and backgrounds, perspectives that I go to when I need to know what the heck is really going on, right? Like, what am I missing? How am I coming across? What is it that I'm not doing a good job about? And then I brace myself for that conversation because I'm probably going to hear things that I don't agree with and I can't change. But there might be something that I can do, right? Maybe I can stop saying like or maybe I can speak more clearly, slower, with more intent. Maybe I can insert more pauses. I speak differently around men, right, than I would around women, right? And that's intentional and that's just life. So I will say, like, definitely look for mentors who are men, who are older, who are younger. If somebody's a rising star, like hang out with them, right? Like we're not competing against each other. Like we have to work together. And so, of course, if somebody's being a jerk, like ignore them. But I would say for me, like I do have my little core group of men that I know I can go to and be like, I have no idea what this means, or women, but of course, like the men are helpful because sometimes I need them to speak on my behalf, which sucks. Like I can't say what I need to say, but I need them to say it because the work needs to get done, or I need money for my business. And if it has to come from them, then that's fine. But I just want to be realistic about that. Like we're outnumbered, right? I can't ignore men. We're not there yet. Until all of you make your own cyber businesses, and then we can all collaborate and hire each other. But that's just one thing I want to share is there are mentors everywhere. But don't like seek out their advice before you seek them as a mentor, because asking someone to be a mentor means really nothing. But asking for specific advice, as y'all have asked us today, is how you become connected in a genuine, authentic way. So that's what I'll leave y'all with.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I hope everyone here is going to be able to connect with y'all and, find their way into the field. And thanks again. Everyone have a great evening. And I will definitely follow up with you ladies on email. And I really appreciate your time again. So virtual round of applause, because I know not everyone can unmute themselves. So thanks, y'all. You have a good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you, Sara. You rocked it.